Yay! Hi YouTube! So yeah, this is episode 10 of my vlog, and it's taken a long time to type this up and shoot it, because I've had lots of problems, losing the internet, laptops dying. I've gone through 2 laptops in the last month. So there you go, the joys of being a TI. I'm going to do this episode in 2 parts, because both entries, the entry that I'm going to do from back in 2014 and the more recent journal entry from this week, they're quite long, so and they're not, the subjects aren't really related, so I think it's probably better to do them separately. And Ginger's here. Ginger's joined us. Ginger. He's purring away. He's very happy. He's not always this good. You meow a lot, don't you? Wakes me up in the morning. Meow, meow, meow until I feed him. And then he doesn't like what I fed him, so he meow, meow, meow again. The other day I gave him 6 different tins of food to choose from, and he still wasn't happy. Were you? I wish I could read his mind. But you're very spoiled, really, aren't you? It's my own fault. Okay. So this is from the 19th of April 2014, and it's Saturday. I went to see my nan today. I didn't stay long as my aunt and uncle were taking her out for a meal later to celebrate my uncle's retirement. She accidentally let slip something she assumed my dad had told me, but which he hadn't. His secretary, Jean, had been stealing money from his company. About £50,000, she said, in total, over 6 years. If you remember, if you watched episode 9, then you know that I had a massive row with my dad the day before this, and that he was in a really bad mood, and this explains why. So this is a footnote to my journal entry, and it's quite a long footnote because it explains about my dad, because he's had secretaries steal from him before, and I think that the same people who have ruined my life, because I no longer have a job or career or friends or family that speak to me, and yeah, I think they're trying to ruin his life as well. So yeah, this is a footnote. My dad, when he left school, trained to be a surveyor. My nan wanted him to go to university, but he didn't, and instead he went to work. After training to be a surveyor, he went to work for his dad in his business, which is steel spinning. They make anything in steel, from saucepans to parts for jet engines. My nan didn't want him to go into the family business. I think she was a bit snobbish, hence the desire for him to go to university. She worked herself in my granddad's factory as his secretary, but she always told me it was the bane of her life. The factory was a very dirty, noisy place, and my nan wanted her sons to be professionals in suits, not oil-stained overalls. Anyway, my dad trained as a steel spinner and a tool maker. Steel spinners look a bit like lathes for wood carving, but are much bigger and technical, and of course made of metals, not wood. The tools are used when you are spinning the steel. He has done this his whole life. At one point, during a recession, I was still at school. So this might have been in the late 80s. The business was losing money. At that point it was owned by my nan, as my granddad passed away, and she still worked as a secretary there, and it was also partly owned by my great-uncle Roy. He wasn't a spinner like my dad. He tried, but he wasn't much good at it, but as his father had gone into the business with my dad's father, he still had a job there doing administration tasks, but I was never quite sure what his role was exactly. On Saturdays, my mother would like to go shopping in Birmingham, and she would take me and my twin sister with her. I liked looking at the clothes, but unless we'd saved our pocket money, we couldn't buy anything for ourselves. And since we left primary school, clothes were things we only got on special occasions like birthdays, so it wasn't always much fun trailing after my mother, but we would always get a bag of chips, which was a treat. And then we would walk down to the factory, which wasn't far from the city centre, maybe a 20-minute walk or a bit longer, to meet my dad, as he always went to work on Saturday mornings. Anyway, neither my nan nor Roy had much business acumen, and while the business was losing money, they were simply using money they had saved for their retirement to keep it going. I suppose hoping that once the recession was over, the business would start making money again. But I guess after watching their savings slowly shrink, they decided to sell up, which would have put my dad out of work. So my dad offered to buy the business off them. I don't think he actually paid money. I think he bought the shares for a nominal amount and in return agreed to pay them a pension, which he still does to this day. My great-uncle Roy has passed away, but his wife Jean, the names are just coincidence, Jean never worked at the factory, is still living and gets this pension off my dad. I'm going into a lot of detail with this story, but I thought it might flesh out some of my childhood, as I haven't kept any diaries from when I was young, or they've disappeared. I was shocked when my nan told me Jean had been stealing from the business. It explained my dad's bad mood the night before. This is not the first time a secretary has stolen off my dad. When my nan retired, she hired a replacement, and her name was Diane. My dad used to laugh that she had a face like a bulldog, and she did a bit. It was a joke because she was like that in nature too. She was a very forceful and domineering type. My nan said she chose it because the others who came for the interview would not have liked working there because it was such an old place and the factory was dirty and oily, and she didn't think they would have stayed long. In the end, though, it wasn't a good choice. I don't know what happened because at the time no one told me what was going on, but later my mum told me that my dad had let both Diane and another employee, a friend of my uncle's whose name was Dave, go because they had been taking money. She said his suspicions had been strong, but for some reason he hadn't gone to the police. Maybe because Dave was a family friend. Maybe he thought it would cost more time and money than it was worth. I don't know, because he has never spoken about it to me, and my mum didn't elaborate. My dad ended up selling the old premises and moving to a newer place, which is much more modern and clean. And my brother Chris works for him now. I don't think it's a coincidence that my dad has had 2 secretaries steal money off him. Like I don't think it's a coincidence that my mum's bone cancer was diagnosed as just a stiff shoulder or pulled muscle. It makes me feel sick, and very sad to see this being done to my family, despite their treatment of me. But there is nothing I can do to help them. They are collaborating with the perpetrators of my own harassment, without realising that these same people are also seeking to harm them, to make life as difficult and miserable as they can for them, and in the case of my dad, to ruin him. If they had not collaborated with these perpetrators in the first place, if they had been honest and told me what was going on, we would have been able to have this discussion. But while they continue to tell me I'm delusional and paranoid, what can I say? Maybe this is one of the reasons the perps want to maintain a distance between myself and my family, because I know the truth, and the truth tends to spread. I could tell them things about their own lives which would shock them, and make them very angry when they realise how they'd been taken advantage of, and used and abused. These are insights that have come to me over the years. At the time these events were happening, or I was told about them, I wasn't able to join the dots, but now I know these sociopaths better, and the things they do and how they work. Part of me wonders if I should just write my dad a letter, but then another part of me thinks he wouldn't believe you, and might even go to someone with it, and I don't want the local mental health team banging on my door again. Okay, back to my nan. I was shocked about Jean. I'd only met her once. I thought she was a bit bossy, but otherwise okay. She lost her husband to cancer, about the same time my mum died. I remember my sisters talking about Jean, and saying how nice it would be if Jean and Dad got together. I didn't think it likely after meeting her. I didn't think my dad would want to be with another bossy, domineering woman. Also, I didn't like how my sisters seemed to think they should be deciding who my dad should be with. I don't know if they did anything to try and set them up, but they enjoyed talking about it, as if they had some authority over my dad. Okay, this is quite another long footnote about my mum's cancer and when she died, and about my sisters and how they behave towards me. They behave like this a lot. I remember one time, my mum was still alive. I had come home from Cambridgeshire because I'd given up my job. I was literally forced to because my employee had a shouting fit at me. I tried to ignore it and wait for things to get back to normal, but then I saw her advertising my position on Gumtree.com and I felt like she was tricking me. I was willing to forget it while she was planning to let me go, perhaps without any warning. Technically, I was self-employed, although I only worked for her, so I didn't have any employee rights, hence she wouldn't have treated me, else she wouldn't have treated me the way she did. It was all over a Sunday she wanted to work. She wanted me to work. I agreed, forgetting the choir I sang in, which her husband also sang in, had a wedding to go to. Of course I told her when I realised, but she got angry. In the end she said I could go, but I had to leave straight after to do the afternoon session. I was a tutor for her autistic son, but I was also like an au pair, so, as I did household duties as well. But for some reason when I came back in the afternoon, she was in a bad mood with me. She started saying I should have told her I had this wedding to go to, that it was my fault and how could I be so forgetful and so on. Of course, if I'd been thinking straight, I would have told her that her husband was also going, and he must have told her, so she was just as forgetful as me. But actually I didn't say anything, I just stood there looking stony-faced, which got her even more angry. For a while I actually lived at their home, not in the house but in a little hut-type thing her husband had built in the garden. At this point though, I'd found a room nearby to rent. At weekends, when I wasn't working, I would go home. My mum was very ill at this time. She sat most of the day in a chair in the lounge, and she needed my dad to help her sit on the commode. Her legs were very swollen, she had lymphedema. Looking back, her doctors and nurses did very little for her. She didn't get any treatment for her lymphedema. I think they just told her it was a side effect or part of her disease. At the time I was still believing in modern medicine. I knew nothing about the dark dealings of Big Pharma. I had no idea that people had cured themselves of cancer just by going on organic, vegan diets. She read a book she told me about by a lady called Dr. Plant. She had cured herself of breast cancer by going on a dairy-free diet. I think I assumed this meant my mother was going to go on this dairy-free diet. She did eventually, but by that time the cancer had spread to her bones and the chemo had destroyed her immune system, and she eventually died of a lung infection. My mum loved her junk food, and she was always a bit chunky. She had the belief that because she wanted to eat something, she should be able to do it without any consequences. I think this was part of her bossy-like nature, and the belief she could be in control. It's very upsetting to look back and think, if only I knew then what I know now, if only we'd had a better relationship. But it wasn't until she got cancer that we became friends as such. Since for all my childhood, I had been emotionally abused and occasionally physically abused. And the emotional abuse continued till I left home, and after that, whenever I had contact with my family, really. I still regret, though, not researching cancer and alternative treatments. Not that she liked receiving advice from me. My family were very defensive if I ever tried to give them my advice. They saw it as an attempt to be clever, and they would see these occasions as some kind of competition about who was the smartest. I didn't understand their reactions for a long time, being autistic, otherwise I would have kept my mouth shut. I was usually just excited about what I'd found out and wanted to share it. So whether she would have listened to me, if I had known then what I know now, I don't know. My mum didn't like the woman I worked for. She didn't seem to have much sympathy for the fact my mum was dying of cancer, and my mum said it was unkind of her to make me work weekends and stop me coming home to visit. I think partly she was saying it because she wanted to let me know that she liked me coming home, and that she liked me. I can't remember why now, but for some reason I had to stay with my sisters for a time. I think I must have been sleeping on the sofa when I came home. I remember sleeping on the sofa at times, and with my sister Grace and my brother Ed still at home, probably there wasn't a spare room. There was a box room, but that was being used as an office. So I was spending some time at my twin sister's house and sometimes at my younger sister's house. I remember on this one occasion we were all in the lounge, me, my sisters and my mum. My twin and my younger sister were discussing when they would be able to have me, and this scheme involved a lot of to and froing for me, a few days here, a few days there. I was over a barrel, of course, I had nowhere else to go, and I kept my mouth shut. This was when I'd quit my job and come home, so I'm not talking about the weekends here. I was over a barrel, of course. I had nowhere else to go and I kept my mouth shut. I think they were enjoying the feeling of control they had over me. They are quite similar in a way. They both love being in charge, and they've always had a rocky relationship. I remember when we were teenagers, me and my twin shared a room. Chris had his own room, and my younger sister had the box room. It was so stressful sharing a room with my sister, I persuaded them that it would be better if my twin and my younger sister shared the room, and I went into the box room. Of course it didn't work. They didn't get on and kept arguing, and we swapped back again. Looking back, I think the only reason they were allies was because of their common dislike of me. Anyway, they were discussing what to do with me now I was back home, and then my mum said something, which probably seems quite a small thing, but which has stayed with me because it was the first time any of them had ever spoken about me, as if I was a normal person. I can't remember the exact words now, but she told them off, and said neither of them were considering what would be best for me. I went off on a lot of tangents there, but again it's because I haven't journaled about my life before 2014, or if I have I've lost it, except for some autobiographical short stories and poems from the creative writing courses I've done. But back to my journal entry of the 19th of April 2014, my nan has been telling me about my dad's secretary Jean stealing money from him. I didn't think it was likely that my dad would want to get with Jean, another bossy woman. Sadly, this was the case with my mum, and is the case with my sisters, and also my nan. It seems to be a running theme in our family. As it turns out, they didn't get together, probably because Jean didn't want my dad to find out she was stealing money from him. When I got home, only Ed was in. My dad and his new girlfriend Julie had taken Grace out to buy her some new things. I quizzed him about Jean. He told me she'd been arrested a couple of days ago by the police and was still in custody, and they'd done something which meant she couldn't sell her property. He thought it likely our dad would get his money back, and she would get a sentence of 6 to 8 years. Apparently she hadn't been very clever about it. She had just been paying herself whatever profit the company made, meaning they only just broke even each month. She also hadn't been paying the inland revenue, and the company now owed about 30 grand in taxes. I'm feeling quite sick again as I write this. This has been a very hard journal entry to write. I'm angry because I know this was all planned by my persecutors, and it seems neither my brother nor my dad had paid much attention to their company accounts. They had trusted Jean implicitly. I'm sure my dad was very angry with himself, because this had already happened once to him. I imagined he was also embarrassed to tell people about it. I'm quite shocked my dad's accountants never questioned him about these payments to Jean. I don't think Jean was a certified accountant, so they must have had someone doing their accounts for them. If it was as clear as Ed said what she had been doing, which also suggests she wasn't a certified accountant, then why the hell didn't the accountants see it? I'm thinking they probably did, and they were told to keep their mouths shut by the controllers. This is a footnote. As far as I know, Jean hasn't been charged with anything in the end. The police told my dad, if you can believe this cock and bull story, that they had failed to take the case to court in time. Apparently they were a day late, and my dad was told he would have to take civil action himself. This seems very suspicious. The fact that there was a deadline so close to when the crime had occurred, and that the police missed it by a day. I don't know much about legal stuff, But say if someone commits a murder, it doesn't matter how long it takes for them to be caught and charged, they will still go to court. And actually, as it turned out, Jean had stolen a lot more than £50,000. A crime that you can get up to 8 years in prison is a very serious crime, and I find it hard to believe that deadlines exist that can get missed, leaving criminals like Jean to get off scot-free. Either way, whether it is true or not that the police were no longer able to charge Jean, it still looks like there was interference in the legal process, and that the same people who told or encouraged Jean to steal the money were the same people who got her off. The only reason I can think of as to why she was so brazen in the way she did, in the way she stole the money, without even attempting to cover up what she had done, was that she knew, when she was found out, that she would get off, which indicates that whoever was behind this had a lot of influence. Okay, so that's the end of my journal entry for the 19th of April 2014.